Hi everyone, this is Cathy from When Cathy Colors, and I'm back again with another coloring tutorial. This time I'll be coloring a page from this beautiful book called Fantasia, and this is wonderfully bound because it's so easy to work with. This cover hides a beautiful spiral spine which makes turning and working with the book very easy. Now it also comes with perforated pages which makes it very easy to tear out if you want to take it out of the book. And the paper, I've noticed, has a really good tooth on it, which means it has this nice texture which will hold your colored pencils very well. So today we will be working on this page. I call her the goddess because this book is after all by an Indonesian artist, and we will be using our wonderful chameleon colored pencils. They come in 50 colors, and that would be 25 pencils since there's a color for each tip. Now what's wonderful about these pencils is that the colors opposite each other are great to blend together. So let's get started with coloring in our goddess. And my tip for coloring in with colored pencils is that before you begin, you do want to decide where your light source would be. So for me, I want a more or less global light source, but a general area where the shadows would be, which would be on the left. So I want to start off with a really nice and thin layer of my pencils. I'll start off with light coral, and I'll just color in all the areas which I feel will have shadows on her face. Now, most of the time, most people will start off with a lighter shade, the soft shell, depending on what kind of skin tone you're going for. But for this one, since she's an Asian, I want to use a more slightly darker skin tone, closer to a Southeast Asian skin tone. So here I'm just leaving out all the areas which are white, and those are the highest parts of the face, because with coloring pencils it's very hard to erase, so it's better to just use the white of the paper rather than going back to erase them. And then once you're done putting down the first layer, I'm going to go ahead and add ginger on top of that and blend it out just so that we can add the little shadows on her face. Now always remember, when working with colored pencils, I don't press on the pencil too hard. I'm just letting the colors sort of lay on top of the paper and let the colors and the beautiful pigments work together by themselves. Never push the pencil into the paper too hard, otherwise blending will be very difficult later on. So here I'm just adding the little shadows on her face, and I will be adding a little bit of fluorescent pink just to give her cheeks a bit of a blush and to give some warmth to her face. Now to deepen the shadows further, believe it or not, I use a lavender color, and for this set it's called Pink Orchid, and I just touch up all the areas which I think should go even darker. To further create an even more dramatic shadow, I'll be using Spice, which is at the opposite end of Ginger for this. Remember, we used Ginger earlier, and it's great to try and use colors within the same color family when doing a certain area at a time. So I just flip my pencil and working with the ginger again, I'm trying to blend it out. And then for the deepest shadows, I'm going to use Heather, or which is the dark purple, to create the darkest shadows of her face. I never recommend just going up and using just plain brown for a skin tone, because our skin is more complex than just a bunch of browns. Now I go back and blend it all out using the first color we've used, which is light coral. And then for her eyes, I'm going to use basil to make them pop out of the page. I'm going to blend that with a little bit of jade, and then put the darkest areas in with some heather. Now for the darkest areas, I do put in some midnight blue just to add some more drama to her face. I use the same color to add some more shadows to her face, and then use cobalt blue just to add some shadows on her eyeballs. And then for her lips, I'm going to use some warm pink, and like the skin tone, I just want to lay it down very lightly, flip that over and use plum to create the shadows. Make sure to leave some highlights to make her lips more plump. and I adjust it a little bit using some browns. Now put in the darkest shadows, I put in some heather or dark purple. Now for her hair, I do want to give her dark black hair. So I'm gonna lay it down first with plain old black. I'm just gonna color all the areas very lightly just so that I have a base to work with and so that I can see where I want all the colors to go. To begin adding depth to the hair, I'm going to come in and add a little bit of mocha and color all the areas where I want the shadows to be. So that would usually be nearer to the root of the hair and nearer to the tips of the hair. After mocha, I want to move on and create a darker feel to the hair. So I'm gonna go back with black, and this time I'm gonna be pressing a little bit harder on my pencil just so that I can see that color pop out more from the page. And then this time I'll be following where I've already put the shadows using the mocha. And then I'm gonna follow that up with a dark purple or the color heather just so that I can tie up all the colors from her face up to her hair. And then I come in with another layer of black, so that's our third layer, and it's the only way we can create this rich and vibrant color on the page. So again, my tip is layering is key, and as well as patience. So to create some warmth in her hair, I'm gonna add some ginger towards the areas where I want the highlights to be, and then I'm gonna use long strokes of midnight blue just so that I can create a little more drama to the shadows. Next up, I do want to color her crown, so I'm gonna start off with some yellow as the base, and that's the color lemon peel. And I always do this whenever I want to create something that looks gold on the paper, but I don't have any real gold pencils. And in fact, it looks much better than just using plain old gold pencils doing it this way. So I always just lay down a layer of yellow on wherever I want gold to be. And if you notice, I do leave out some parts white. That's where all the highlights would be. And I would be putting on some shadows in a bit using an ochre colored pencil. And for this set, it's called Ginger. And I will be just putting in all the places where I want the shadows to go. And then once you're done with that, I will just flip the pencil over and then add it where I want the deepest shadows to go. And that tiny little bit of color just really makes the gold pop. And then once that is done, I'm just gonna go over that and blend over with some lemon peel again, just to make the yellow a little more brilliant. Next up, I'll be coloring a part of her headdress with some patterns on it. And the little technique I like doing is that I want to lay down the primary layer of colors first before doing any blending on top. And that will create the illusion that the whole pattern is part of one textile. So for this one, as you can see, I've just laying down using some heather, or which is like a violet color. And then as part of the textile, I'll also be using green or shamrock. And then once that is done, I'm gonna start adding some shadows to it by just flipping over the pencil, and that would be the color clover for this set of pencils. And then I'll be doing exactly the same thing on the purple, but this time I'll be using some electric blue. Then to tie it all up, I'm going to go back and use again the heather or this dark purple color. And that's when I'm going to shade over everything, meaning the purple and the green all together, just to create a whole and blended look for the whole part of her clothes. Then I'll be adding some highlights using some warm pink and some shadows using mocha. Next up, I'll be using some plum to color some areas of the coloring page. And for this, I want to put it on the gems, her ribbons in the headdress, and part of her clothes. So right now, I'm just laying down a very light layer because this will allow us to create richer colors later on. Next, I'm going to use some heather to create some shadows in the gems and the part of her ribbon. And then once again, I'll layer on top of it using plum, but this time I'll be putting a little bit more pressure to create a more brilliant red. And then I'll be blending on top of everything using strawberry, which is a kind of lighter red in the set. I'll add some midnight blues just to add the darkest shadows for this section of the coloring page. Next, let's work on the petals in her headdress, and I'll be using warm pink to put in the first light layer for everything, using the same color for part of her blouse. And then I'll give my pencil a flip so that I can use the plum color to create some of the shadows. To color the rest of the pattern of her sleeve, I'll be using some lemon peel, and I'll do a really light color shading first, and then I'll just flip that over to create the shadows again, and that would be grapefruit. Now I do want to add some warmth to my work, so I'm gonna add some yellow or lemon peel over all of my petals. I will be using some ginger to add some shadows to the yellow part. And then finally, I will shade over all of that using heather to create this more dimensional effect. Then finally, I'll be adding some plum on top of everything just to make the pink color pop a little bit more. For the other petals, I want to create a darker reddish pink color. So I'm gonna start off my first layer using strawberry. Make sure to leave some highlights near the tips of the petals to create a more dimensional look. I will also be using plum on the sleeves, and I'll be adding some mint for part of the patterns. Again, I'll just flip that over and use that to shade the sleeve. And then to add some shading to these petals, I will be using some heather. To deepen the shadows, I'll be adding some electric blue to the sleeves and to the petals as well. And then to make that red color more brilliant, I'll go over it again using plum. To add some contrast, I'll be adding some green into this headdress by using basil, and I'll use that on the beads of her necklace and on parts of her earrings. To add the shadows of the beads, I'll be using jade, and a trick to this would be to just color a small section of it rather than coloring all of it with a shadow to create an illusion that it's round. And then for the deepest shadows, I just use a little bit of heather. I will layer again using some basil, and then add the final shadows using some midnight blue. Lastly, for the background, I picked a really nice and cool color because I do want to keep our figure right up in the foreground for us. So I'm using some electric blue, and I'm coloring lightly all of these little clouds in the background. To mirror all the purples we've used in our character so far, I will be using thistle, which is a lighter reddish purple color. Just add all the shadings for parts of the clouds to create some depth to them. Next, to create even more depth, I'll go back and add some more shadows using heather. And you don't really need to put a lot of it, just add where you feel like it's the darkest areas. Next, add some highlights to your clouds by using some warm pink. And then add a little bit more shadows using some midnight blue. So there we have it. This is our goddess from Fantasia using Chameleon colored pencils. This is Cathy from When Cathy Colors, and thank you so much guys for watching. I'll see you again next time. Bye!